You ever hear about these guys like Eckhart Tolle who, you know, just get struck with enlightenment and then all of a sudden they're able to sell tons of courses and everything to teach everybody else how to?
It's amazing how it
Where do these
happens,
guys
right?
get off? In today's episode, we're going to be talking about is enlightenment a crock of BS? And this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
I'm always struck by how often these enlightened fellows love to sell courses and everything on
I
meditation.
know. They pop up out of nowhere too. It's like they get enlightened, and it's like the next logical step after you get enlightened is to become a guru and sell a bunch of crap.
Totally.
Like, I didn't know that that's how it worked.
Yeah, I know, right? Wouldn't it be
You
crazy
get
if they're just
enlightened
a
and you
bunch of
form a
like
company.
egomaniacs? They're just like, you know,
Probably.
there's probably
That's
nothing
probably what.
between them but then the other guys who think that they're enlightened and they make everybody drink Kool-Aid and wear white Nikes or whatever, red Nike. I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
But
that
yeah,
was crazy. Yeah, the
yes.
cult. Cults are weird. Yeah. Well,
But
you
it
know
is
what's funny about
frustrating. Yeah, go on.
it is. Well, I was gonna say what's funny about enlightenment is like I've read a lot of philosophy by people who have been considered, I think, enlightened, who were referred to as sages even back in the day. But like, when they present like an idea of like the wise life or wisdom or good life or whatever, like it's usually an ideal. It's something you have to work, you continuously work towards, but not necessarily something you reach. So
Hmm.
then I've always wondered like, well, is wisdom like attainable? Or is it like so like I mean, theoretically we probably can be wise in our lifetimes. Does that mean we're enlightened? Or is it just that we're always to be enlightened is to be always working towards that self-improvement?
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing because it's like, when you're going through a terrible time in life and everything's falling apart, and you're depressed and miserable and nothing's working out, and you hear about enlightenment, and you're just like, oh, I want that. Like, I
Yeah.
want that. And you hear about these guys who just like get it, Like
Yeah.
some people had to put in a lot of work, but some people just like their life was miserable, and then they're just struck with enlightenment, you know? And it's just like, what the heck? But like, so there's a saying in, I think it's in Buddhism, where like what comes after enlightenment? Another 10,000 hours on the cushion. So like
Yeah.
maybe that's what comes after. But I'm so, I'm, it's, well, okay, this is my own personal stuff coming up.
That's fine. That's okay.
I'm so turned off with these people who are not humble. Like I would think that someone who's enlightened would be humble and would probably deny that they are, you know?
I feel like they're selling things is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't think I agree with you. I have a hard time believing that they're actually enlightened.
Hmm.
Because it just doesn't come off that way, right? Like it's what you think of as an enlightened person. I
Yeah.
don't know. When you're concerned with like profit margins and marketing and everything. Now, granted, like I have heard anecdotally, I've read stories of people who've like had a terminal illness, squeaked by, recovered, and like whole life changed afterwards, right? Because they had that basically like a near death experience where they were that thinking about. And in some ways, you might say they were enlightened afterwards because they like, I think it was like they realized they were just living the wrong way, right? And like, I think that's something we all struggle with because like, we see so many examples of what the right way to do things around us all the time. We forget that we can do anything, that we can go off that track onto a totally different track, right? And live however we want, but it's scary. And so I think like maybe that's being enlightened. It's just being yourself. But I don't know. I do. I find these people, I would find, I mean, maybe there's some out there that are really trying to help people and they figured something out. They really want to help people. But like, I do find it hard to believe when you look at the prices and
Well,
stuff.
that's another thing that
It's
I've
more
heard
about
that's, oh
profit.
my gosh, yeah, like freaking
Yeah.
Deepak Chopra. Don't get me started. Anyways, but here's another thing that I heard that like there's a saying that no one is enlightened until everybody's enlightened. And then there's another saying that everyone's already a Buddha. So like there are all
Yeah.
these sayings that maybe they're conflicting, maybe they're not. But it's like, okay, so if you're saying that you're enlightened and nobody's enlightened unless everybody's enlightened, then I must be enlightened. I just don't realize
Yeah,
it.
that is true. That's like the what property? There's some property that explains
Transitive.
that. There you go.
Yeah.
Transitive property
Yeah.
on the tip of my tongue.
Using yeah, using like algebra. This is middle school algebra, people. Yeah.
Welcome. Yeah, the well, it's funny because like even Socrates, right? said that, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. And I think that's what I think sometimes enlightened is knowing that you don't know. Sometimes that is enlightened to me sometimes. It's like not feeling like you have to know the answer to everything. Not feeling like everything has to be defined in black and white, but just accepting the world as it is, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think there's a certain humbleness you would think that comes with that. You would hope.
Hmm. Yeah. Keanu Reeves had a moment like that in the movie Thumbsucker, where he's like, I don't know what the answer is. Or maybe that is the answer, not knowing, but I'm not sure.
Right?
Something like that. I want so like you okay, are children enlightened? You
Well,
know,
you always,
before
because
before all the programming that we stuff down their throats, are children enlightened?
well, Buddhist, Nietzsche, I mean, so many different philosophers and smart, wise people have said that, we need to return to the childlike state. That is like the sage is always represented that way. The Buddha is represented like oftentimes it's that childlike spirit. That's sometimes a spirit, but right, that idea of like viewing the world without that crap filter in front of it that's been imprinted on you. And I think like, I think the idea there is like maybe children are to an extent, they just don't have the rationality with it kind of right away. But think about it. A little kid doesn't pre-interpret anything. They judge an experience solely based on the experience itself, whether it was good or bad. They have no preconceptions. They have nothing that's going to get in their way or prevent them from thinking they can do something. You ask a little kid what they want to do. Some will say like, I want to be a dog. Some will say an astronaut. Some will say, like I mean, like anything. There's no limits because they don't know that there's limits, right? Or that society's placing limits on them. So I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be a dog. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Yeah. I
I
want to
remember
be
a
an
kid did that in one of my
airplane.
classes. He said he wanted to be a fire dog. I was like, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Way to think
I want to
outside
be a
the box.
fireman. Tell people just one of those sweet Dalmatians that they have. That'd be awesome.
Wearing the red hat.
That's what I aspire to.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But that's just it, though. I think that's like, you know, think about how many of us, like every situation in our life, we have all this information that we're applying before we even encounter it. About the people we're going to meet, about whether we like them or dislike them, about like the thing itself. It's like, and all the stresses and stuff. We're so not in present right now, I think. And I think that's part of it. That
Hmm.
little kid energy or spirit is like being in the moment, just living in the moment, taking things as
Mm.
they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, there's also so many like, there's the mind and there's the brain. And like I've heard it said that like you can't find the mind by looking at the brain. But it's like the brain definitely dictates a lot of what's going on. And especially
that's,
as we get older, we have all these neural pathways that we're just like getting stuck on repeat. Maybe when people get struck enlightened, it just, breaks that signal and they go back to the old way of not having those.
maybe. Yeah, I always wondered that because, it seems like the consciousness would be physically based on like our mental processes, but science still can't explain consciousness, what I always found fascinating, right? Like, it's like
Mhm.
all the hardware is there, but we just can't figure out the next step.
Hmm.
Maybe there's some software we're missing or something, right? But like, yeah, that is interesting. I wonder if that is it. Maybe it is like we get stuck with these pathways on repeat and just you need to smash that system and start over,
Mm,
kind of.
yeah. It's
I
just
do get sick though
frustrating
of
that it's not, it's not easily accessible for
I
everyone.
know, right? That is hard, like
Hmm.
everything else. Well, I do get pissed too because you constantly see all these sages and gurus and this and that selling these, super expensive courses and stuff to get enlightened. And it's always immediately, it's always now, it's always like, blah.
Hmm.
And it's like, I feel like that flies in the face of so much of what wisdom and enlightenment's about. Because it's never about rushing. It's
It's
never about getting there right now. It's like, it's never about the goal. It shouldn't even be about the goal usually. At least that's
yeah.
how, when you
Well,
read
like
the
even
classics.
even with the death and rebirth cycle, how like enlightenment's when you finally step out of the cycle of death and rebirth. So
Yeah.
like even if you, became a monk and just meditated all day every day, there's no guarantee in the old system that you would become enlightened this lifetime. And so you may go
Yeah,
on this lifetime and next lifetime and 1,000 more lifetimes until eventually you become enlightened, and then you can step outside of the death and birth cycle. But it poses a problem because in the West, we think that we only have one life.
Well, Buddhists also say that like nirvana is like living in this world without the veil, right?
Hmm.
So like, that could also be enlightenment too, is see looking at the world as it really is. I always found that in I always found that in like Camus, Nietzsche, the existentialists have a lot of like, I guess you could say quasi-Eastern type thinking there,
I always
right?
like them
With
because I
like
just imagine them smoking cigarettes in some French cafe, being like, "Whoa,
that's literally all they
what is
did.
this?"
Every picture of them is just chain smoking, right? And having coffee. It
And
looks like a
like
good life.
Sartre with his funny eye. Yeah.
But so because I mean, Camus talked about, the absurdity of life and the good life is kind of recognizing and being aware of absurdity of it all and like living with that. And I think there's something to that too. It's kind of like all of them seem to arrive at the idea that like, enlightenment is not defining things. It's not giving these strict hard meanings. It's being more open-minded and more like ready to accept things, I think, as they are, which is cool.
Hmm.
But it is hard. It's hard to break out of our norms and our lives. Everything around us tells us to be a certain way. Think about it, you pick up your phone, you see social media, everybody's giving you an image of what a good life should be. You walk around, you see people, they're dressed up a certain way, they're doing things, everybody has ideas about how you should be. It makes it very hard to live,
Hmm.
you know?
You know what it is? It's that enlightenment is totally outside of your control. That's the frustrating part when we talk about
Could
dichotomy of
be.
control. Enlightenment's
Yeah.
totally out of your control as a result. Like there's no like do this and you're guaranteed enlightenment. There's do
No,
this and maybe you'll become enlightened, which makes it totally 100% out of your control. Like granted, you're more likely, I think, to become enlightened if you meditate than if you don't. But it even happens to people who don't meditate, like Eckhart Tolle. He was just really depressed and then he became enlightened, or really
this
anxious
sort
and
of
then he became
meditation,
enlightened.
right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know. But
Well,
like, yeah,
yeah. No, that's true. I mean, it is a result. I think what you can do though is you can work towards it. It's like meditation, right? You can do things that might get you closer to it and be helpful to you. But like, yeah, I guess you can't control it. So I always like thinking of it as an ideal, right? Like enlightenment as an ideal. It's something you continuously work towards. And it's the journey that matters, not the goal. Right? So like what matters is that you're trying to get there, that you're trying to improve yourself continuously. Because we're all going to make mistakes too. And I think that's the other hard part. People think of enlightenment, they think like you get to this level and you can never go backwards, but you most certainly can. You know,
well, that's another
enlightenment
thing that like,
it could be a
can somebody
moment,
who's enlightened become unenlightened?
Oh, I think absolutely. Yeah, they can fall back into the old ways,
Yeah,
crawl back into the cave for the security of those nice walls,
yeah. Because
back when they were
I've
around.
definitely felt enlightened with psychedelic substances. You know,
They can help, yeah.
yeah, it feels
Well, I
like
think
it.
you can get to like a lot of people. I mean, that's why they used to use that stuff. Why a lot of cultures have used it because it can get you. It's like a hopeful way to get there, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it can come and go too. I think you can have moments of clarity, but then like everyday life kind of like it's like the tide, right? It comes back in and pulls you back out into the BS.
Yeah,
And then occasionally you
and then you
wash up on the
drown.
shore. Yeah, in the
And you wash
chaos.
up on shore bloated and yeah,
You
smelly.
get another moment of enlightenment and then boom, back in the ocean. Yeah. Yeah, it can happen though. I mean, I've felt moments, I have had moments where I felt very much like there, but they don't last forever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right.
I
Well, we
mean,
hope by the end of this episode you become enlightened too. That way you can join us and Eckhart Tolle and all the
yeah.
other enlightened beings on the earth.
In
Because
that sweet clique
if
of
you're not yet
enlightened
enlightened,
people.
though, you should buy our enlightenment guide product. It's a course
Yeah.
that'll teach you how to become enlightened from your miserable
In
life
7 hours
now.
or less.
That way you can be enlightened like us. Yeah. Anyways, this is the Existential Stoic Podcast. If you enjoyed it, like the video, give us a good review, and we'll catch you guys later. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.